Welcome to the Business Bravery podcast, inspiring stories from coaches and course creators to help you do the next brave thing in your business. Coming up on the Business Bravery podcast.
Now, if we move on to, for instance, nutrition for your cycle, in your menstruation phase, when you're actively bleeding, obviously blood has iron in it. Now, during this phase, your iron levels are generally becoming lower because you're losing blood, right? So for women, really important for us to make sure we're having lots of iron-rich foods. And we can get iron from animals, such as red meat, or we can get iron from plants. Basically, dark leafy greens are really a fantastic source of iron, but we don't absorb it as easily. So we want to make sure that we're getting those dark leafy greens with a vitamin C rich food, which actually helps our absorption. So that would be something to look out for during the menstruation phase. And that's going to help you with things like energy levels and mood, even as you're actively bleeding and your hormones are a little bit lower. And so if you find that there are times during the month where you really feel like, oh my gosh, I'm like verbalizing my thoughts so well, you might be in your follicular phase. So that's a great time too, if you like want to talk about getting a raise at work or a promotion, or you have different presentations that you want to do. That's a great time to do that. But also in the follicular phase, many women may start to feel like their hunger levels are a bit lower. And so really, if you're feeling that, honor that feeling, and also think about prioritizing protein. So making sure you're getting enough protein and fiber. So fiber is coming from all different kinds of plant foods. And so getting lots of fiber is great for gut health. One of my first really brave things that I did was in college or in university. An American company came to the university that I was at in New Zealand and interviewed people to come join them in the US. And so I got a job offer from them and ended up moving to the US then to be part of an oil and gas company because my degree was in chemical engineering. Had to find an apartment, like do all the things that you would normally do to live by myself. And that was my first real experience of like moving away from home and really needing to rely on myself. So that was a huge, brave thing that I did.
I'm your host, Tiffany Gilliland, an Australian business and mindset coach with 10 years experience in online marketing and the creator of the Business Bravery framework. I help coaches like you to be brave so you can stop dreaming and start doing that next big brave step and finally make more impact and get more clients. From speaking on camera to selling to launching, my approach to bravery helps you take bigger leaps without the mindset spirals. It's the secret ingredient to bigger results. Today, I'm talking to Renata, an intuitive nutrition coach, global speaker, author, wife, and mum of 3 beautiful kids. Her mission is to empower women to nourish their bodies by understanding foods that work best for them, how these foods impact their energy, and redefining their relationship with food and their bodies. She loves creating good-for-you recipes that taste amazing, that honors your body's energy and supports your health transformation. I'm so excited to share this episode as Renata and I discuss women's reproductive health, monthly cycles, and creating a safe and comfortable environment for women to speak up about cyclic health. Then we get into the good stuff about understanding our cycles and how that can affect our business, exercise, and relationships. I've even started applying this to my business already. It's amazing. She introduced me to this awesome concept of seed cycling, which I'm looking forward to trying out. And then we discover more about her business journey, diving into nutrition to solve her own and her family's health issues, and then how she moved into becoming a nutrition coach. This is an amazing episode, and I can't wait to share with you Renata's stories of business bravery, past, present, and future. Now, who's ready for some business bravery inspiration? Let's dive in. Right. Hi there, everyone. I am so excited today. I'm here with the amazing Renata Trebing, an amazing coach who's going to be talking to us about all things like nutrition and like cycling and like nutrition for your cycle and all those awesome things. And I'm very keen and excited to find out more about what she does and yeah, all the brave things that she's doing now and in the past and the future. So, Renata, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on the podcast and to talk to me about bravery and the brave things that you are doing. If you wanted to just let us know, like, all about your, like, what your business is and what brave things you're doing sort of right now in your business. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about bravery, specifically in terms of my business, because I definitely feel like it's been an evolution, as I'm sure with many people it is. So what I do is I'm an intuitive nutrition coach. And what that means is I help women figure out the foods that work best for their bodies. So instead of trying to like be strictly adhering to a particular diet, like paleo or keto or vegan or, carnivore, instead of just trying to follow what someone else is doing, it's really about tuning into your own body and figuring out what helps me to feel my best. And so that's such an empowering place to be, because oftentimes when we're trying to stick to a very strict diet, it becomes overwhelming. It becomes frustrating. It becomes like, oh my gosh, I've fallen off the wagon over the weekend. Now what do I do? Like, do I just get back on it? Do I just like throw it all out the window, So instead of looking at health as like a cookie cutter approach, it's really about finding that personalized, unique way of eating that works for you, because that's the most sustainable way of eating. That's how you actually create healthy, sustainable change, as opposed to really trying to force yourself into the mold of someone else. So that's what I do. And what's really interesting, and you mentioned it in the intro, is one of the really brave things I'm doing is talking more about cyclical living and cyclical health. So very specific for us as women who have menstrual cycles, or perhaps are moving into perimenopause or menopause. There's a lot of information about that, but so many women don't know anything about it. So even when I talk about nutrition for your cycle, I remember distinctly talking to my mother-in-law about how, there are certain foods that can actually help you to balance your hormones so you don't have to have PMS. And she said, and she's postmenopausal, so she's like, I had no idea. Like, I wish someone had told me that however many years ago, but no one did. And so it's all about sharing this information, because it can have a huge impact, not only to your health, which is of course incredibly important, but also to your self-esteem and your self-confidence and your self-love.
Wow, yeah. So powerful actually, just that, yeah, that connection there from what you eat into that whole, the self-esteem, the self-love and that kind of thing. For myself, I've been on a bit of a journey in the last couple of years. So I had to sort of find different ways of eating, because I had to watch sort of sugar levels and things like that. And yeah, it's been a bit of an experience and stuff like that. And yeah, so definitely keen to hear more. And I think it's interesting that, was it your mother-in-law said, oh, if only I'd known. And I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, same for me. Like when I was younger, like for years, I believe like I had PCOS for years and I didn't know it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if someone had have told me some things, and then, like, I don't know, the internet wasn't as big of a thing back then, so I didn't even know what I didn't know. And oh man, yeah, such powerful
The whole
work you're
thing.
doing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. And just like you said, while you were going through all those years, what I'm assuming, of having PCOS symptoms and not really knowing what to do with it, you could have alleviated some of that anxiety and overwhelm, right? If you had information. And what's really interesting is, because we're talking about menstrual health or the menstrual cycle, it's often societally perceived as something that's taboo, right? It's often perceived as something that like needs to be whispered about, right? Or that it's unclean, or we shouldn't talk about it, or men shouldn't talk about it, or like as sons and daughters shouldn't talk about it. And really, that's such a misconception, in my opinion, because guess what? We all came here from a woman who had a menstrual cycle, right? So, and what's really powerful is that the menstrual cycle is also being called the fifth vital sign, because there's so much information that our menstrual cycles can tell us about our overall health and wellness. And if we're paying attention to those signs, it actually allows us to alleviate potential conditions that could occur later, such as diabetes or hypertension, various other things. So it's really powerful. And I really feel like recently my mission in my business and in my life has become even more consolidated because of the sharing of this particular information.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just a quick question then. So I just did want to check in. So what are the, like, you've told us about what you do and who you serve and that kind of thing. And I know we'll get deeper into that throughout the podcast. I apologize. I can speak English, I promise. It's early
Me
morning
too,
for
sometimes.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to check in. So what brave things are you doing in your business right now from a bravery perspective? Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that this particular question, and I'm applying it to the discussion on the menstrual cycle, and even more specifically about how the female reproduction health topic has been so under discussed or has been really underrepresented, and even to the worst extent has been diminished in terms of reproductive rights over very like all of the past decades. And there's so many examples of this. I learned recently from a client actually, which was very disheartening for me, that at a certain point, up to 1 in 3 Puerto Rican women were actually sterilized against their will. And basically they were told you couldn't get a job unless you were sterilized. They were also not told things like how it was an irreversible procedure. And that just makes my skin crawl. Like the amount of oppression that has happened to women in regards to their cycle health or just their health in general, their reproductive rights. There are so many women that don't know that. And being able to look back in our history, even in America, right? To be able to look back at that and see all the examples where women's health was deemed less important than men's health. And this even happens to this day. If we look at the amount of money that's used in scientific or medical studies, there is absolutely more money being pushed into men's health studies versus women, even if both men and women are being affected by a particular health condition. And it's even more apparently seen when it is female only health issues versus men's only health issues. There's way more money being pushed into men's health issues and their studies. So just by the division of money, of finances being put into current medical studies, and this has been examined and analyzed in many PubMed papers, which you can look up online, it is so clear to me that there is less importance placed on women's health issues, and even more specifically around our reproductive health. So one of the brave things that I did last week, I believe, was posting on my Instagram all the examples over the past 100 years where women's reproductive health was deemed as less important. And I mean, even going back to the 1800s, there were men that were physicians that published books that said women couldn't get higher education because it would diminish the amount of blood flow to the uterus. I mean, it's crazy stuff like that, which obviously now we understand, right? But even so, there's this stigma around talking about menstrual cycle health. And we see that playing out in TV shows and movies, right? Like there's even an episode of Friends, which I adore Friends, like it was one of the pivotal things that I watched in my childhood. But there's even a scene where Chandler Bing goes to a play and it's like the vagina monologues or something like that. And they have a close-up of his face. And when they talk about like periods, then he looks awkward and uncomfortable, right? But that is perpetuating this idea that the menstrual cycle and talking about it is somehow not okay. And so just talking about it, just being able to share about it, I think was a big step forward for me in terms of bravery and courage. And so many women banded around me and were posting in the comments and sharing the posts, and even talking about how there are young girls right now who are starting their periods, they don't have access to period products. Like I read a story recently where a girl literally just used toilet paper for a year because she didn't want to talk about with her mom that she had her period. I mean, we don't have to live like this. And also, it's so isolating. I mean, I could go on, but it is the information, it's the communication, it is just making it part of our everyday conversation that is so important for us women, and not just for women, but also for the men in our lives too.
Oh man, gosh, so much important information that you've just given me that I didn't even know or think about. And even like talking about that thing from Friends. I mean, yeah, like I remember when Friends came out, like this is gonna age me, but when Friends came out, like it was the 90s, I was at university, and yeah, like those were the messages that I got in my youth. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I know like in more of the online space, the circles that I move in, I get to talk to amazing people like yourself and other women who are talking about these issues. And I love that freedom to be able to talk about it and things now. But I definitely know like when I had my part-time day job and I had my cycle, and I needed days off for my cycle. Was it that bad at the time? I didn't know about eating for your cycle and things like that. Not that I know enough now. There's still so much more for me to learn. But yeah, just like there's no way I could have messaged my boss going, hey, I've got my period. I'm not coming to work. Like,
Yeah.
don't talk to me today. Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's
mm,
so true. And I think that so many women feel the same way. I mean, even talking to someone closer in terms of relationship, like their partners, like how many times do you go to your partner or spouse or boyfriend or whomever that you're with and you say, oh, it's day X of my cycle. Like I'm really feeling like this. Could you please help me out? So many women just kind of silently have their period, and then like what, guys aren't supposed to know that happens. Guess what? It happens, right? For many women it happens pretty regularly.
mm,
And I don't think there's anything wrong with having that conversation, because it actually helps you to create a stronger relationship if you know where you're at in your cycle and you can communicate your emotions and mood to your partner, because
mm.
it actually allows you to have clearer and more constant communication.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. Such a good point, actually. And yeah, I'm definitely lucky in that at least like I can talk to my husband about those things. But I mean, even for me, like telling other women, like it's just interesting. I hadn't thought about it until you brought it up, but just about
Mm.
all of these thoughts and I don't know, like inhibitions or like or lack or I don't know I'm not coming up with the right words today, but just like that those thoughts that come up that make me like I wouldn't even want to tell another woman that's what I'm going through, because like for
Yeah.
the messages that I got when I was growing up and things like that, it was like, oh, women just use their period as an excuse to get out of things and stuff like that. And meanwhile, curled up in a ball in bed when my cycle was at its worst
Yeah.
and unable to do anything. And it just, yeah, oh man, just it'd be
Yeah.
so good if people talked about this more. Like I just completely see where you're coming from, and I love that you're being so brave and talking about that. What was the process of doing that first post? Or does like when you made that decision, was it an easy shift for you, or to actually do that first post when you started to talk about this? Or
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
what was really interesting was it was very easy from the perspective of I knew I needed to share the information. So it was just very clear to me. And I talked about like being even clearer with my mission on this earth in terms of the work that I do, but also who I am on a daily basis. It just was further cementing that idea in me. So I knew that it was what I wanted to share. And what was interesting was when I was creating the post, I could tell that this was a big step up. Like it was a big up leveling or elevation in my content and in the way in which I was speaking about health. So it was easy from that perspective. Now, you post something like that and you're, in my mind at least, I was thinking, oh my gosh, like maybe there are going to be haters, right? Maybe there are going to be people that will be like, well, I mean, that's kind of dumb. What about X, Y, or Z? But no one said that. And in fact, the worst comment that I got, which was really not bad, was just someone saying, I've learned about period positivity in my adulthood. My mom always told me to keep quiet about it, which I think many women's moms probably did the same. And then secondly, she just said, I mean, I don't think that we should shout about it, but maybe we shouldn't also like keep it quiet. And so then from that actually came a really interesting post about why we should shout about it, because it's been so underrepresented in history, and there's nothing wrong with it. We don't have to hide it, right? And even so much so, like I feel really amazed and proud of, there was a particular like Olympic athlete, I think, or a triathlete that chose to free bleed during her event. So basically meaning that she didn't use any kind of period products to hold that blood. And so she just bled throughout her event. And think about that bravery. I mean, you're on the Olympic stage or a triathlete stage where everyone can see you, and you're choosing so powerfully to make a statement in addition to competing in this event by free bleeding. So, I mean, that is just amazing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. um, so for those listening, the look of shock on my face, like as you said that, just me visualizing that, and yeah, I mean, like I love it. But yeah, it's just learning some things today, that's for sure. Like, and but I
we're
love that.
rocking your world. Yeah.
Yeah, but in a good way. I mean, oh God, I sound like an old baby boomer or something. It's like it's just like yeah, just I just love that. I don't know. I love that things are changing. I love that people are talking about these things now. I love all of these kinds of shifts in the world, and yeah, it's definitely through brave coaches like yourself, and just I don't know, it really inspires me. It's kind of funny because it's like, I mean, some of the stuff that I talk about for my business is, helping people be brave. And yet I'm still not even sure it's on that level of, hey, I'm going to be on a world stage and free bleeding and stuff like that. It's just, oh
Wow.
man, yeah, there's just so
Yeah.
much inspiration there for me at least. Yeah, I'm sure for others
Yeah.
listening. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
totally inspiring for me too. And I think it just gives you that context of like how how free can we actually be? Because I feel like part of bravery is not holding yourself back. Like it's being free to an extent,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
imagine having that level of freedom where you're like, I'm just gonna do it. Like to hell with what anybody else thinks, right? Or says. Like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
do what's best for me. And that for me is bravery.
Mm. Yeah. Oh man, so powerful. So powerful, so exciting, and I'm so glad you're doing this kind of work in the world. How has being this brave just like, I mean, changed things for your business? Like you were just talking about health before in general, and then you sort of moved into this space because you felt called. Like, how has that is that my understanding? Is that correct?
That's
and
correct.
and how's
Yes.
that changed things? Yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of how it's changed things, I think it's provided me with even more focus. So, that's helpful, right? And then also because it's been like speaking about cyclical health, that's been my journey over the past several years that I really feel like it's been the culmination of lots of trying different things, of lots of holistic methods, of lots of nutrition methods to come up with like a game plan that is applicable to many women's lives in order to figure out, okay, how can I work with my cycle versus trying to feel like I have to fight it or I have to have like feelings of animosity or frustration around my cycle, but actually knowing it's telling me something. Like these are all signs. Your body is telling you signs all the time. And if you learn to listen to it and pay attention to what it means, you have so much more freedom. You have so much more peace because you're actually working with yourself now. And so that has allowed me to be able to create a new group coaching program that I think is going to be so powerful for women. I mean, just like you said, that level of inspiration when you're surrounded by other women that are also up leveling their self-care, up leveling their menstrual health care, and knowing what kinds of foods to eat and sharing with each other their wins and their trials, that becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Like it really becomes that safe space where we can have these kinds of conversations much more frequently, and it empowers everybody because we're banding together. So it's like the idea of, when the tide rises, all boats rise. Like that is the feeling that gets created. And really, I feel like with having this newfound focus and specificity, it really becomes such a tool for me to be able to help even more women.
Wow. Oh man, I love that the group and the everybody rising, and I feel that with all of the work that so many of the coaches that I talk to in terms of bravery, the people who get who light up when they talk about bravery and things like that. Not everybody clicks with this idea, but yeah, I just love how kind of we're all sort of doing that, and I think we're all kind of tapping into this wave and lifting and that kind of stuff. Oh, I love that. And yeah, so I was just wondering, I'm trying really hard because I just want to ask you all these like, okay, let's get into some practical stuff because I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to know some things for me.
Yeah, no, go it. Do it.
Kind
I'm
of
here
which
for it.
kind of
Yeah.
diverges from the bravery thing, but it's just like, yeah, I mean, like how like what sort of practical things could listeners maybe take away from this podcast in terms of like yeah, eating for their cycle or just being able to keep an eye on that. You said it's the fifth most important sign or the fifth
The
sign
fifth
or
vital
something.
sign. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 I mean, how could we make this more practical? You guide
Yeah.
me,
Okay.
please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great question. Okay. So, I mean, information is great, but implementing information is even more powerful. So, I love this question. So, first step in understanding your menstrual cycle and your health is knowing where you're at in your menstrual cycle. So, first things first, the menstrual cycle is not just when you have the bleed phase, right? It's not just when you have your what we colloquially call the period. It's the whole month. And so many times women don't realize this. So there's actually 4 phases in a woman's cycle or in like the approximately month-ish of the cycle. The first phase is the menstruation phase, which I'm also interchangeably using the term bleed phase. So obviously that's when you're actively bleeding. Then following that is the follicular phase, and that's basically when the follicular stimulating hormone is being produced so that the egg, right, the egg is getting ready. So anyone that wants to become pregnant, they probably know quite a bit about that. Then the third phase is the ovulatory phase. So that's when you actually ovulate. So the egg is released from the follicle. And this is when you have the highest chance of getting pregnant. And then the last phase that comes right before the menstruation phase, which returns in the next cycle, is the luteal phase. And so basically that's when, if you become pregnant, then hormones are going to change. But if you're not pregnant, then we're going to start seeing hormones decrease again. And so that's often linked with, more PMS type symptoms. So those are the 4 phases. And really the first step is understanding where are you right now in your cycle. So maybe you're actively bleeding. Okay, you're in your menstruation or bleed phase. And tracking your cycle is how you figure out where you're at. So day 1 is really the first day that you're actively bleeding, not spotting, but actually bleeding. So that's important to know. And then usually you want to track every day thereafter by adding an additional 1. So day 1 is the first day, the second day is obviously day 2, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll start to notice, and you can use lots of cycle tracking apps and various things like that, where you start seeing changes in energy or mood, or you might also start to notice, for instance, cervical mucus may change, and if you're using the basal body temperature method, you're also taking your temperature. So that's going to change during ovulation. So these are all signs that the body is telling you that you're shifting into different phases. So first step is always figure out where you're at in your cycle. Now, if we move on to, for instance, nutrition for your cycle, in your menstruation phase, when you're actively bleeding, obviously blood has iron in it. Now, during this phase, your iron levels are generally becoming lower because you're losing blood, right? So for women, really important for us to make sure we're having lots of iron-rich foods. And we can get iron from animals, such as red meat, or we can get iron from plants. Basically dark leafy greens are really a fantastic source of iron, but we don't absorb it as easily. So we want to make sure that we're getting those dark leafy greens with a vitamin C rich food, which actually helps our absorption. So that would be something to look out for during the menstruation phase. And that's going to help you with things like energy levels and mood, even as you're actively bleeding and your hormones are a little bit lower. So that's the menstruation phase. Then in the follicular phase, I also like to call this kind of the superwoman phase, because that's when energy levels are starting to increase. And so you're really starting to feel like, okay, I'm getting more energy. My libido is also increasing, because as we're getting closer to that ovulatory phase, right? Ideally, the body, is really preparing for possible pregnancy. So we want to like have glowy skin. And so all the hormones work to do that, so that you appear like more attractive, and you also are much better able to communicate. And so if you find that there are times during the month where you really feel like, oh my gosh, I'm like verbalizing my thoughts so well, you might be in your follicular phase. So that's a great time too, if you like want to talk about getting a raise at work or a promotion, or you have different presentations that you want to do. That's a great time to do that. But also in the follicular phase, many women may start to feel like their hunger levels are a bit lower. And so really, if you're feeling that, honor that feeling, and also think about prioritizing protein. So making sure you're getting enough protein, and fiber. So fiber is coming from all different kinds of plant foods. And so getting lots of fiber is great for gut health. Then we move into the ovulatory phase. So this is when the egg is released and possible pregnancy can happen. So really, if you are looking to get pregnant, it's usually like the 5 days before ovulation and the day of ovulation that gives you your highest chance of pregnancy. And then after that, your potential for pregnancy drops off very quickly, because you've already ovulated. And so during this time, you're going to see like a little bit higher energy. And then as you get into the luteal phase, it's going to start to drop off. So in your ovulatory phase and also in your luteal phase, many women find it's harder to stay hydrated. And so really making sure that you're sticking with your water intake, or perhaps using electrolytes to help your body hold on to hydration, is really important. And then specifically in the luteal phase, many women start to get cravings. So this can be like a PMS type symptom, as well as like you might not feel anything during this particular phase, which is totally great. Some women don't have cravings, some women have a lot of cravings. And so it's about understanding, okay, what do these cravings mean? So if I'm craving chocolate, does that mean that perhaps I'm low in magnesium? So cocoa, which is one of the main ingredients in chocolate, high in magnesium, which is really helpful for relaxing muscles. So that could be telling you, okay, my body is actually really tense and it needs something to help me relax. And so cocoa is a great way to get that. However, we don't have too much of it necessarily, because it's usually got a lot of sugars in it. So looking for some way that's like a healthier chocolate option to give you that magnesium, or supplementing with a magnesium supplement. And then also, as your energy is reducing during the end of the ovulatory phase into the luteal phase, this is a great time for rest. So really leaning into that self-care. And sometimes that is like eating more comfort foods. We actually find that more women eat more during that luteal phase, because our body's getting used, like it really needs more energy to prepare for the menstruation phase again. So some studies have shown anywhere from 90 to like 300 or 400 additional calories during this time. And that's okay, because we're also comparing and contrasting that with the follicular phase, where our hunger levels are a bit lower. So it's all balancing out in the cycle. And if we weren't looking at it cyclically, then we would, many women would beat themselves up internally, because they're like, well, I'm so hungry all the time. What am I supposed to do? Like, I feel like I'm way off of my diet plan, or whatever the case may be. And so it's really important to know this information, because then you can say, okay, I know I'm going to be hungrier, so I'm going to really opt for, maybe it's more sweet potatoes or more like slow release carbohydrates to keep me fuller for longer, but also adding more bulk to my meal without feeling like having to feel guilt, or having to feel like this is something that's going to just totally push me off the wagon again. So those are a few tips for how to eat for your cycle.
Wow, yeah, it's just interesting. As you were talking through all that, I was like, oh yeah, I've noticed that. Oh yeah, I've noticed that. And I know for me, like at the beginning of my cycle, the bleed phase, um, I didn't know this for years, but my husband would always make sure that that's when we had like red meat. He
Oh,
knew this stuff
that's
before me.
beautiful.
He's like,
Yeah.
yeah, now's the time. We're having the steak today. I've changed the order. And then he told me what he was doing, and I was like, oh, what, really? And he's, yeah. So,
Now that's a good husband right there. Yeah.
yeah, I know. And yeah, definitely noticing some of those other things you talked about, for me, at least with the the luteal phase and wanting to eat more and stuff like that. And although for me, I've often maybe linked it also to you during that follicular phase, that's when I get a bit more excited about working out. And so the increase of activity
Yes.
also, that's when I've sort of linked it to that. But yeah, definitely could see that even in times where that hasn't necessarily happened. So so much good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank
So you
you.
can totally sync your workouts to the various phases, just like you mentioned. And usually, like strength training or resistance training is more suited for that follicular phase, right? Because you have more energy, you're feeling like superwoman. Perfect. And then as you're getting closer to that menstruation phase, usually many women feel like more restorative exercises, like walking or yoga, like light yoga, not like a hatha or anything like that. But, just listening to what your body feels like is really important for movement as well as nutrition.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. Awesome. So much to think about and take in. Oh, it's man, life is so fascinating these days for me. Just all these things that I'm learning and all that good stuff. Oh, I love that. So back then, now that I have more of an idea about the stuff that you do, and have picked your
Yeah.
brain for all of this good stuff. Back to bravery. Yeah, so like have you always been a health coach? Have you had a business before this? Like tell us a bit about some brave things you might have done in your past. Let's dive into that.
Yeah. So I was sharing with you before we started recording, I actually didn't grow up in the States. So I was born in Australia and I lived in New Zealand. And so one of my first really brave things that I did was in college or in university. Um, an American company came to the university that I was at in New Zealand and interviewed people to come join them in the US. And so I got a job offer from them and ended up moving to the US then to be part of an oil and gas company because my degree was in chemical engineering. So, yeah, so a little bit different, but also not really different because chemicals is what we're talking about, hormones, chemical messengers, etc. Right? So that I ended up moving just by myself to West Virginia, which is like a really like not a big city, kind of like a country town, but it's a state. And so I moved here literally with 2 suitcases. That was it. Had to find an apartment, like do all the things that you would normally do to live by myself. And that was my first real experience of like moving away from home and really needing to rely on myself. So that was a huge, brave thing that I did. Eventually, I ended up moving to Houston with the same company and ended up interviewing for another company. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because during that time, I really had lost a lot of self-belief. I really didn't have a lot of self-confidence. And so I just remember he was at that time my boyfriend, he's now my husband, like he would coach me to help me to get ready for these interviews because I was like, I don't know what I do. Like, I don't know how to explain to anybody what I'm doing. And so it was really helpful to have that support because he helped me to find that self-confidence again, to be able to go into these interviews and really show my potential. So I was able to join this other company still as an engineer. And then eventually, really, what happened was I had changed teams for a while and we went through the recession. And I thought it was so interesting because when I changed teams, I actually found that this particular team was not where I wanted to be. I really did not like the energy and the morale had gone down significantly in this team. And so with the recession, I was like, I've heard that people are getting laid off. I've heard that people are getting severances. So I talked to my husband about it and we were both agreed, like, let's just try to hold out. Like, I mean, literally it was so bad in this team that I would come home crying. I mean, it was like the worst of the worst, right? So we had agreed I was going to hold out for a severance. I was going to really just like kind of buckle down and just try to hold on. And the whole time I'm literally like asking the universe for a sign. I'm like, I just need a sign. Like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Or is there something else for me? And so I just remember very distinctly being called into my manager's office to have a conversation. And I thought to myself, okay, this is kind of weird. So he sat in the room with me and then he ended up telling me that I was getting laid off. And I think that normally people would have quite a like a different response to what I had. Like I'm sure usually people would be upset or crying, various things. And what I did actually was I laughed. And the reason why I laughed was because I had been asking the universe for a sign, and it was so clear to me that that was my sign. So, I mean, in terms of bravery, being laid off, like that's not usually something that people look at with a lot of joy. And so, afterwards, I did shed some tears. I did call my husband and tell him what had happened. And, thankfully, we did get a severance package, which was helpful for our family because we had 3 young children at the time. So, having to come home and know that, I was being laid off, and also looking at it from the perspective of, let me see this as a blessing and not a curse. So just being able to be here with my young kids and homeschooling them and doing all that kind of stuff, while also working on this business, because it was a little while before that I started my blog, that I started helping people with nutrition. And that allowed me the time, space, and freedom to be able to continue to build up this particular business, whilst also being able to be home with my kids. So, I mean, that was another huge step in my life in terms of what I did before versus what I do now.
Wow, wow. And so how did you get into nutrition? Like what attracted you there, or how did that transition take place? Just, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so this is really funny because, my family is a big Indonesian family. And so we love food. So everything, I just remember, like we would go to my grandma's house and we would always have a ton of food, and they would always, like, all the women would be cooking, and then we'd like all come together with like tons and tons of food all the time. So I've always loved food. I've always loved cooking. And I've always had an interest in what food does to the body, because my dad, he also had a lot of health issues. And so it was always something that I was trying to do to like eat healthier, right? So what was interesting was the real pivotal moment was when my first kid was born. So her name is Olivia. And so when she was an infant, what I thought was really interesting was she had a lot of like gastrointestinal issues. So the way that showed itself was basically she cried all the time. She had to be held all the time. If you put her down, like you couldn't put her down. Like I just remember one night I held her the entire night. And then I woke up in the morning and my arm was like numb, like I couldn't feel it. Like it was all the things, right? All the horrible things that you hear about with infants, that was happening. And then to make that even worse, I just remember once I was changing her diaper and there was blood in her stool. So I knew that something was horribly wrong. So we called our pediatrician and went to him. And he said, you know what? It might be that she's actually allergic to something you're eating and she's getting it through the breast milk, because I was breastfeeding her. So he said, we can send off some blood to get analyzed and figure out what she's allergic to, or you can just take out some of the common allergens from your diet and see if she responds. So I didn't know it at the time, but he said one of the most common allergens for infants is dairy. So I took out dairy from my diet, and I was amazed because she had like a total 180-degree shift. Like she was sleeping better, no blood in the stool, which is obviously amazing. And she didn't have to be held, and she slept through the night. Like it was like a light bulb switched. Mm. And what was so interesting was it was after the fact that I realized, you know what, I actually feel better too. Like it's not just that I did this thing on behalf of my kid, right? It was like, I'm actually noticing I feel more energetic, and I feel like less bloated and less constipated and less lethargic. It was all of these things that I started to notice about myself. And so because I was minimizing my dairy, or really I eliminated it for a long time, I ended up creating recipes that were dairy free. And I was serving that to my family. I thought they tasted amazing. My husband liked them too. And so people were asking me for recipes. And eventually I started a blog to share those recipes. Well, I met a certain individual, and he was like, you know a lot about food, just through my own research. And so he said, would you help me in my new business to start nutrition coaching? And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I really enjoyed it. Like that sense of fulfillment that you have when someone else has that light switch turn on, when they start to notice how food is affecting them or not affecting them in the way that they want. And so that was such a feeling of like, I'm in my purpose. So that was really how I started with nutrition coaching, and then eventually just started with my own company. So I ended up leaving that previous company, started my own, and really doubled down on that, and specifically started working with women, because it really is an area that I feel like is underserved. And there's so much negative information out there about diets and diet culture. And so really, I want to help women create a new relationship with food, and obviously with their bodies too.
Oh, wow. What an amazing story. And especially, I guess, like my own experiences too, in the last few years, where it's like I had to track certain foods and see their effects on my body and everything like that too. It's just, yeah, I really felt that story, with your daughter, and then that whole, oh, actually, this makes me feel better too. It was such an eye opener. Like I know for years, like I just thought, like, some of that bloating and discomfort and stuff, like I thought that was just the price of getting older. And then it was like, oh, actually no, there's whole other changes. It's just that I can imagine for your clients and your past clients too, that revelation of, oh, I found something that works, and how that can feel. It's so powerful. I love that work that you're doing. So
Thank you. I'm so glad that that story resonated with you. Like, I really feel like, just like you said, so many people are walking around with this feeling of like, this is just what it feels like to be getting older. Like, my body has to be falling apart, or I have to like be bloated all the time, or I have to, get tired at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and need a coffee or need a candy bar, right? There's so many reasons for that. And when we really slow down enough to be able to pay attention, just like you did with tracking your food and how it made you feel, there's such power and impact in that, because it really can change how you move forward in the world and how you approach food differently.
yeah, absolutely. And I know just how powerful it is linking it to how you feel, because like in years gone by, it's like, oh no, I shouldn't eat this food because it's bad. Versus now, it's like, actually, like, yes, I can eat this food, but I know that I'm going to feel terrible, or I'm going to be, craving more carbs or some of those things. And it's a whole different decision making situation from my perspective. I find just having that extra knowledge, and less of that, oh, I'm holding myself back, or denying myself something, or that sort of thing. So yeah, do you find that with your clients too? Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I love the way that you put it, because oftentimes I think, especially when we're first exposed to dieting, right? What we see on social media, what we see on TV, it feels and looks a lot like deprivation, right? And so I always find it so funny. I mean, funny in the way that sometimes we just have never been told it's okay. You can actually eat more. You don't have to keep limiting yourself. I mean, food restriction can create such trauma around food. And many people don't talk about that. Like, so many women that I talk to have instances in their childhood that have helped to create and perpetuate trauma around food. And we really don't look at that. I mean, even simple things like, I talk about this kind of in a joking way, but I think many women have had this too. Like, when you're growing up, you're probably sitting at the dinner table and your parents probably told you, you got to finish everything on your plate because there are kids in this country, like insert the name of a country, right, that don't have food. And so you like, oh, well, I want to be a good girl or a good boy, so I'm going to eat everything on my plate. And sometimes that can be to such a degree that we actually, and I had a conversation with a woman recently about it, that she actually gets physically sick when she overeats because she's had such trauma around food. And so, yeah, I think it's really interesting the way in which food creates these habits, but also these emotional connections. And so it's really important for us to look at all of these things, especially when we're looking at changing our food relationship. And so when you've been told, like, you can actually eat more, you don't have to deprive yourself. And then they also see things like their waist is getting smaller, their hips are getting smaller, like the pounds are dropping off. And it feels like, a client told me this once, she was like, I don't know what you're doing, but it feels like magic. Like, I just keep eating and then all this stuff falls off of me. Like, it's such a freeing experience, because you don't need to be tied to those old paradigms about food and what you quote unquote should or should not eat.
Oh, wow. Yeah, definitely those powerful shifts. And yeah, I remember when I first made some of those shifts to eating healthier, and it's actually you do eat a larger volume of food, but it works in the body so differently. And yeah, it was a bit of a mindset shift for sure for me anyway. That was my experience.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay, so yeah, I love your story of just about getting into nutrition, and then you had the opportunity to start coaching for someone, and then you built your coaching business. What was that transformation like into building your coaching business? I know you've talked about it a little bit, but just what was it like making that decision? Was there any sort of doubts or challenges or things you had to overcome to make that shift? And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, there were so many. Right. And that's where
Yeah.
we grow. That's where we learn. So I will say the choice became easier because once again, the universe gave me a sign, and that was the other gentleman ended up closing his company. So it was like, well, I still want to do what I do. Like, I still get such fulfillment out of helping people with their nutrition. So I knew I wanted to keep doing it. And it absolutely was met with challenge. People in my family still are like, what is it that you do? Like, I don't really understand. Like, do you make money doing that? Like, why are you doing it? There's a lot of misconception, I think, around entrepreneurship, especially in the online space, because it's not tangible. It's not like I have a building somewhere, right, that has my name on it. It's not like I have like investors and I have to report to them with P&Ls. So I think even to this day, there are still people that don't necessarily understand, and I'm okay with that. I think for me, one of the hardest things was getting support from my family, even if they didn't understand it. Like, I just wanted them to be able to say to me, okay, I support you. And sometimes there were times when they didn't, and sometimes there were times when they did. And so that is really, I think, a continuous journey, because different people need different things to show that something's working. Like, I just knew within, like, my intuitive self just knew that I was here for a higher purpose, right? I knew that I was helping people. And that was what kept me going, versus like other people needed to see, like, well, how much are you making? Like, are you able to support your family? Like, all these different things. So there were a lot of challenges. And I mean, there still are. It's just that my approach to those challenges are different now because I have such conviction in what I'm doing.
Oh, wow. Definitely that intuitive knowledge and that conviction is definitely something that I've been working on myself in years gone by, and like sometimes it's stronger than others because I definitely like you were talking about people in your family that maybe want to see the numbers and things like that, and then like I have some of that from my family, but also like the voice that's in my head
Mm.
that's so how do you cultivate like I mean is I guess the way you're talking about it, it just comes naturally to you. But do you ever find you maybe need to cultivate it a little bit more, or lean into that certainty or that conviction, or yeah, how does that work for
Yeah.
you?
So I love this question because I think that maybe in the way that I communicated it, it sounded like it was easy, right? So I want to first set the record straight that it was absolutely a process, and it still is a process. So what was interesting was, so I'm going to get real woo with you. Like, I just felt like I had a particular moment that occurred where I really felt like I heard that, like, this was what I was supposed to be doing, right? And it was so clear to me. I mean, I can't explain to you where it came from or why, or like, I wasn't like high, I wasn't drunk. Like, it wasn't like I was affected by anything, right? It was just such clarity that I heard just a voice saying that. And that's really hard to explain to people, right? That really is one of those things that people are going to look at you like, so should we like admit you to the hospital now? Or, but that's what gave me the conviction in knowing that if I stayed the course, that it would be fruitful for me, like fruitful in ways I could have never imagined, right? Now, compare that also with my human experience, right? Because we all have self-doubt. We all have those moments where we're thinking to ourselves, is this working? Like where are the clients? Like out there, isn't someone out there like needing help, and so there are absolutely those moments. And the process, the journey is learning how to deal with that. And that's what builds that conviction, just like you talked about. It is the daily process of catching those insights where you're feeling less than and choosing to look at the situation differently, choosing to look at it as an opportunity to take aligned action, as opposed to looking at it as an opportunity to go into that negative thought spiral where you go down and down and down and like give yourself more evidence that something's not working. So it's a constant practice, right? Just like anything, it's that constant inner work that helps you to build that conviction.
Oh man, yeah, gosh, that is so true, and definitely has been my experience, and I know I'm definitely getting better and better at that every day. But it's nice to know, just because like the way that you did talk about it initially was, it did make it seem like it just came so much, it came naturally to you. And I'm sure, like all of these things, it's a practice. The more that you do of that kind of thing, the easier it can be to move into that. And yeah, is that what you found? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And like even relating this to the menstrual cycle, right? We talked about when you're feeling great, when you're in your superwoman phase, right? That conviction feels easier, right? Because your energy and your emotions are higher. But then compare and contrast that with your luteal phase, when your energy and mood are lower, right? I've noticed in myself, if I start thinking about those negative things, it is on repeat. Like it's that tape that just keeps playing. But having that awareness of my cycle and my hormones helps me to catch it and be like, okay, I'm going to give myself grace. I might not yet in that time be able to shift to a more positive and productive thought, but I might just be able to catch it and to not take action on that thought, that negative thought, but just to be like, okay, I understand why I'm obsessing about this thought. I don't have to do anything with it. I just can see it. And so what's also cool is that I notice I have more of those negative thoughts right before I'm about to start my bleed phase. So it's actually a sign. It's actually telling me where I'm at hormonally. Once again, we come full circle, right? And so understanding your cycle can tell you so much about why you think the things that you think and whether or not you should take action on them.
Yeah, yeah. I've definitely been there even before I learned as much as I have about the cycle. Definitely been times where it's like, why am I so upset about this thing that wouldn't normally upset me? And then it's like, pull out my little calendar and it's like, oh, hang on a minute.
I'm like, oh yeah.
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 And then I'd like go out and tell my husband and be like, oh, hey, my period's coming soon. I know what's going on now. And he's like,
Right.
uh-huh, yeah.
Like he already knew. He
Oh
was like, I
yeah.
was just waiting for you to catch on. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. He tracks it better than I do. It's
He
a bit
probably has his own
exciting.
app, you know? Yeah.
Something like that, yeah. So, oh man, yeah, so powerful. And thank you for sharing your experience. I just think that that really helps people to, yeah, just work through those potential mindset spirals and things like that.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. So let's shift then into what's coming up for you in the future. I don't know how far you plan or if you're a planner or not, but what kind of things do you have? I know you mentioned that you have a group program coming up. Is that your main focus for the next 3 to 6 months, or are there other cool, brave things that you're working on in your business?
Yeah. Well, I love this question because, yes, the group coaching program is something that I'm very focused on right now. So it's called Love Your Cycle, which I think is the perfect name because we're talking about loving the menstrual cycle and really understanding it. So it's a 4-month group coaching program. And so it is going to be my focus for the next 3 to 6 months because I really want to powerfully serve all these amazing women so that they can understand themselves better, right? We talked about freedom. It gives you time freedom. It gives you peace with your body. It gives you so much goodness because you're not fighting with yourself anymore. So that's really one of my main focuses, really shining that light on women's menstrual cycle health and obviously the nutrition that can be really powerful for supporting hormone balance or hormone harmony, as well as other holistic practices that are really going to be helpful. For instance, if you're feeling super stressed out, what can you do to help that? Or if you're feeling really introspective because you're getting into your luteal phase, right? What could be some journal prompts to help you process some of those negative thoughts? Instead of keeping it locked up in there in that brain of yours, like, let's get it out so you don't have to obsess about them. So that's going to be I'm really, really excited about that because it is going to help so many awesome women. And I just cannot wait to get started. So that's one of my focuses. And then also, I'm going to be doing a 30-day program, which is based on my cookbook. So I have a cookbook that I released a couple of years ago called Nourish Your Body. And I love that you talked earlier about basically blood sugar balance, because all the recipes in the cookbook are built to help you to balance your blood sugar levels. And so what I do for the 30 days is I walk people through the cookbook. So you get to try some really yummy recipes. We talk about health, we talk about nutrition, and we see what impact changing the things that you're eating can have on how you feel, have on your fullness and hunger levels, have on your sleep, your stress, all that good stuff. And I really think that, number one, it's brave for me to launch another program, right? Just like any entrepreneur, any coach, but it's also really brave for the people that step into that space, right? Because I find that food can be such a scary thing for people to talk about. Like, people really think that a nutrition coach is someone that's going to come up to you and like slap a piece of bread out of your hand, right? And give you a piece of kale, right? So like, that's, for me, literally, that's not what it's about. It's about finding out the foods that work best for your body. And when you can come into a space that is non-judgmental, that's really about supporting you with experimentation around food, trying new flavors, trying new cuisines, changing up what you're currently eating to see if it has an effect. I really think that the whole diet culture industry, like, that would be so much different if it was approached in a more wholesome and just like a more accepting way. And so that's really the genesis behind why I created that 30-day program to walk people through the cookbook.
Mm. Oh man, that sounds so exciting. Gosh, I'm like, writing this one down. I'm like, I want to buy this one too. This podcast is going to cost me lots of money. I want to work with everyone.
Yeah,
And
I love
I'm
it.
not just saying that because it's being recorded. I'm like, oh, this one sounds good. I might have to talk to you about this after. So yeah, I love the sound of that. I know definitely for me with balancing blood sugars and things, it's definitely been a really interesting journey because like there's a lot of information on the internet, but then there's how my body actually processes those changes that I make. And it's like, well, yeah, sure, the internet tells me that I should not eat potatoes and I should not eat this and that. And then, but actually, when I eat these other things, and yeah, it's just been very eye-opening. And I love what you say about just that shift. And I think there's more people shifting into a bit more of that, of just, how does food make you feel? And in this way of not somebody who's coming up wagging a finger going, oh, don't eat the bread and don't eat this and that. Like, yeah, I love that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And just like you said too, especially with hormonal imbalances, or, for instance, you mentioned PCOS, right? Of course, your body is going to process food differently because hormones play a major part in body function. So for me, that makes total sense what you're saying. And yet so many people don't understand that. And so they really beat themselves up when they don't get the results, like the quote unquote 7-day or 2-week results that someone else might be getting on the internet, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially like for me, the kind of higher cortisol levels and things like that I naturally have, it just, yeah, it's definitely the whole, oh, you'll get results in 14 days is not always my experience. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind too, I mean, there's so many things, but one thing I wanted to touch on is like, those before and after pictures that people often post, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, for many people it's photoshopped, or it's like, it's made to look as good as possible. Like, first, let's just be real about that.
Yeah.
Then secondly, we also need to consider that at different times during our cycle, we might just be more bloated, right? Many women before their bleed phase starts will have a little bit more bloating. And there's lots of reasons for that around hormones, which we won't get into, but it's important to remember that those before and after photos, they might be taken like during your menstruation phase, and then, you know, a month later during the follicular phase where you're feeling your best and your body is, you know, helping you to look really great for a potential mate, right? And so these things are all things to consider, especially when you're feeling like I'm not getting those particular quote unquote 7-day results or 14-day results. Like think about where you're at in your cycle, because that can also have a big impact on that too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny actually. Like for me, I find that actually like the time that I'm the skinniest is usually right before I get my period. It must be because of the drop of hormones or something. Like that's when I find that yeah, the measurements are a bit skinnier and things like that. And it's like, oh, that's what's going on. And yeah, it's just interesting.
Yeah. So I find that
Yeah.
too. And so for me, and let me know if this resonates with you, for me, it has a lot to do with my like bowel movement regularity. So like not to get super graphic about it, I just wanted to talk about like there are particular fatty acids that are produced in the body so that when you do get to your bleed phase, like right, the whole point is that the uterine lining is sloughing off and it gets eliminated from the body, right? And so the body has to create these fatty acids or chemicals in order to be able for that sloughing off to occur and for all of that uterine lining to get pushed out, right? And so these are called prostaglandins. And so prostaglandins don't just work on the uterus. Because of proximity, it can also affect your bowel movements. So it just makes it easier for your bowel movements to occur. So many women will say something like, I feel like I'm pooping like lava, like just all coming out of me, right? Like that Bridesmaids. I'm sure you've seen Bridesmaids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's because of prostaglandins. And so what's really cool is like when you know that, then you're like, okay, I'm actually having more bowel movements right now, which can give you the appearance of looking smaller, right? Just because things are moving through your GI system faster. Or being released faster from your body. And so just like you, I feel like I feel my skinniest right before my bleed phase begins. And I also know why. And so something else to consider, especially if like you're looking for particular results.
Yeah. Oh wow, yeah, definitely. That's a great point and an eye opener about yeah the actual causes behind that and everything too. Yeah, good to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have one last question for you, and that is if there is somebody who is listening to this or watching this and they have something in mind, like their next big brave step. So it could be their group program, it could be getting their first coaching clients or starting their coaching business, but they're kind of not ready to move forward. They're holding back for some reason. Excuse me. What would you suggest to that person? What would your advice be to that person in that situation?
So my advice would be, I guess, two parts. So the first would be taking aligned action. So for me, I've talked a lot about my mission and my purpose. And so if something is meeting that mission and purpose, I know it's aligned. And many people might also say it's that gut feeling, it's that like centering feeling, like you just know like this is the right step. And just like we talked about before, we have to also build into that the human experience of having self-doubt and not taking that next step forward. And so really, you know, one of the things that I heard today is kind of a good thing for all of us to remember, and that is we could be here today and gone tomorrow. So why not do it? Like, why not just approach each day as like today could be the best day of my life if I so choose it to be? And part of creating that in your life is taking those scary steps. I mean, do it afraid. Do it even though other people are saying, no, you shouldn't, or they don't believe in you, or they don't support you. Do it even though you've never done it before and it's scary and weird and uncomfortable and you just don't know what's going to happen after you do it. Like, just do it, because I would much rather live with regret of having done something than the hope or the wish that I would have.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Definitely the regret or like having tried and at least tried, and even if it doesn't work out or something, it always leads to something and it builds skills in my mind at least. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Oh man, I love that. So for those who are listening, of course, we'll have links to all of Renata's social media and website and everything like that in the show notes. But for those who maybe don't want to go and find a website and click and that kind of thing, where can people find you to find out more about your upcoming group program and all the good stuff you have going?
Yeah, so the best place to connect with me is on Instagram. So my handle is at nourish_with_Renata. And then if you do like recipes and lots of good stuff there, and including nutrition tips, my website is nourishwithrenata.com. But yeah, you can DM me anytime on Instagram.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Renata. This has been an amazing conversation, and I've definitely learned a few things just throughout this conversation myself, and things for me to be aware of and that kind of thing. So, yeah, so exciting. Thank you so much for your time, and yeah.
Thank you. I loved it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to the Business Bravery podcast. Has this episode inspired you to do something brave? Even if it's only send a difficult email, please share it with me on Instagram or other social media channels. Feel free to tag me at Tiffany G Studios. That's TIFFANY. G for golf, STUDIOS, no spaces, no underscores, etc. Or you can use the hashtag Business Bravery Podcast so that I can cheer you on, and together we can inspire other coaches and course creators to do brave things in their business and life. Now, I'm Tiffany, and I'll leave you with this one last thing. What's one brave thing you're going to do today? It doesn't have to be big. Even the smallest steps can create the most massive results. So again, feel free to share it with me either publicly or privately so that I can cheer you on. That's it from me. Until next time, bye for now.